This chart tracks India's current per capita income of $2,675 against the objective known as Viksit Bharat 2047. The goal is to build a $30 trillion economy over the next 2 decades, pushing the per capita average past the World Bank's high income threshold to $18,000. To bridge this gap within 21 years, the country must maintain a real annual GDP growth rate between 7.4 and 7.8%. That requires a relentless, compounding economic engine. But analyzing India as a single, uniform economy creates a statistical illusion. A national average masks severe regional disparities, where highly industrialized states operate on completely different economic trajectories than densely populated agrarian ones. To understand exactly what it takes to pull a billion-plus people out of the middle-income trap, we have to look past the top-line GDP. We need to build a localized mathematical model to calculate the specific volume of capital missing at the state level. That means quantifying the high-value manufacturing upgrades required and auditing the labor force and urban planning structures needed to sustain them. Escaping the middle-income trap relies on precise, decentralized wealth generation at a scale few nations have ever achieved. Per capita income is a fraction, economic output divided by population. Apply that state by state, and you see massive variations. Bihar is bottom at $904. Delhi is over $6,300, but Sikkim is number 1, over $9,100. Sikkim's ranking is the result of a specific mathematical reality. The state has fewer than 700,000 residents. Distributing highly targeted industrial revenue across a tiny denominator naturally spikes the average. That revenue is highly concentrated. Sikkim attracted over 50 major pharmaceutical facilities and leverages its steep Himalayan geography to export surplus hydropower to neighboring states. Its agriculture is optimized for high margins. As a 100% organic state, Sikkim bypasses high-volume farming to monopolize lucrative cash crops like black cardamom. A state like Bihar, with well over 100 million residents, cannot rely on a tiny population denominator to inflate its average. Sikkim proves that high-value output creates immense wealth. But to replicate that success across millions, the economic engine's scale must multiply exponentially. Subtracting a state's per capita income from the World Bank's $14,375 threshold reveals the per-person shortfall. Multiplied by population, it becomes the absolute economic gap. Dividing this total by 1 billion, proxy for a billionaire's output, shows India needs 17,200 new billionaires. But capital doesn't sit in a vacuum. Massive enterprises create a localized spillover effect, generating secondary supply chains, vendor contracts, and employment. We can adjust the model by applying a 1.0x economic multiplier. If a billionaire builds a $5 billion enterprise, the surrounding regional economy grows by an equal amount, creating a $10 billion footprint. This chart shows the revised requirement. The total drops to 1,745 ultra-high net worth hubs. But look at the distribution. Heavily populated states dictate the scale of the deficit. Uttar Pradesh alone requires 312 of these $10 billion hubs. Bihar needs 179. We aren't measuring individual wealth hoarding. This calculation is a proxy for the sheer density of hyper-productive, localized mega-enterprises the country must build from scratch. Developing nations often hit a plateau known as the middle-income trap. They grow rapidly using cheap labor for basic manufacturing, but as wages rise, they lose their cost advantage before competing globally in high-tech innovation. Bypassing that trap requires abandoning low-margin assembly and building high-value, skill-intensive industrial sectors. That means upgrading to synthesize high-value active pharmaceutical ingredients. It means transitioning from basic electronics assembly into full-scale semiconductor fabrication and precision component design. It also requires capturing the high-margin tier of the energy transition, rapidly scaling the production of solar arrays, advanced battery storage, and domestic aerospace manufacturing. A major bottleneck to establishing these industries is the domestic supply chain. Micro, small, and medium enterprises contribute nearly a third of India's GDP. For a semiconductor giant to operate efficiently, those local suppliers must be upgraded to modern, highly reliable production standards. This graph tracks total factor productivity, an economic metric for innovation and technological adoption. Right now, national research and development spending is stalled at roughly 1.25% of GDP. To capture global high-tech markets, private sector R&D must push past the 2% mark. You cannot support $10 billion deep tech hubs on a low-tech foundation. Upgrading industrial hardware and integrating it into global value chains is a strict growth requirement. These two pie charts illustrate a severe structural imbalance described by the Lewis dual sector model. Nearly 45% of India's workforce is concentrated in traditional agriculture, yet that sector produces only 16% of the national GDP. Leaving half the population to divide 1/6 of the economic output makes achieving high per capita income impossible, while millions remain in low-yield subsistence labor. The macroeconomic solution requires moving 100 to 150 million workers systematically out of rural farming and into modern industrial and service roles. Absorbing that labor force demands hyper-urbanization. Economic models show the country needs to build 10 to 15 new megacities to capture the agglomeration effect. This is the sharp increase in productivity that happens when capital, infrastructure, and talent are densely packed together. Currently, urban expansion is messy. Severe traffic bottlenecks, sprawling development, and poor civic governance introduce massive logistical friction, bleeding capital efficiency away from local industries. The labor market also faces a strict demographic ceiling. India's female labor force participation rate has historically hovered in the low 30s. The roadmap targets pushing female workforce participation towards 70%. Achieving this requires universal childcare infrastructure, safe urban public transport, and formal sector expansion. Funding deep tech manufacturing is essentially useless if the macroeconomic software, the workforce, and the urban infrastructure remains bottlenecked in a low-yield configuration. Looking at this heat map of India clarifies the geographic reality of the 1,745 required hubs. Economic development must decentralize, moving out from coastal powerhouses and aggressively populating the densely inhabited northern and eastern belts. To hit the national average, heavily populated regions like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar cannot just maintain the standard 7% growth. They require sustained annual nominal growth rates between 14.5 and 17.4%. To handle capital at that velocity, the incremental capital output ratio, the measure of investment efficiency, must be optimized. Infrastructure must translate to output without capital being wasted on friction or delays. That level of efficiency requires highly functional institutions. Swift judicial contract enforcement secures foreign direct investment, and a rapidly expanding formal tax base generates the sovereign revenue needed to fund early childhood health and education. Reaching the $30 trillion target by 2047 depends on a shift in how India utilizes capital, manages its urban geography, and integrates its labor force. Achieving this vision requires more than riding a wave of national GDP. It requires the systemic optimization of every economic variable.